Président. Professor Stewart, I was wondering, in this balance exercise that the Supreme Court would have to engage in to decide whether mandatory testing would be salvaged by Section 1, what impact would have the fact that this screening test is usually not used as direct evidence, but simply to direct the driver to another test, which will be used as evidence?
That's a good point, but it also, we all know that at this early stage, stage 1, the screening test, the courts have also said there's no right to counsel.
That's
right?
Correct.
And so, and if you say, I refuse to provide this screening device because there's no reasonable suspicion, I'm innocent here, you're committing an offence of failing to provide a breath sample as equally serious as a breathalyzer test. So that, for example, if you ever did get hold of a defence counsel who knew what they were doing, and they said, the police officer says here, I've got to blow into a breathalyzer test, most of the conventional good legal advice is provide the sample, because it's going to be just as serious if you don't, and maybe there'll be a defence of machines not working or something like that. So I think it's sort of, it's integrated. There are cases when you read them. I was reading one this week because I knew I was going to talk here. Judge went through, well, is there reasonable suspicion for the approved screening device? And he starts to distinguish different cases and said, well, in this case, there was more suspicion than in the previous case where there was no suspicion. And anyhow, was there enough to go from that to reasonable and probable grounds for the breathalyzer? And that's what they do. So they're playing with legal tests, but they're basically standing back at the end of it all day and said, did this police officer use more power than the criminal code and charter standards give him? And the answer was yes or no. And there's no consistency. It's judges conscientiously doing their jobs. And so I'm a little opposed to arbitrary rules as if they really mean something. And the best example we've got of that is all the politicians who voted for mandatory minimum punishments, and seeing judges when they review it that often they don't make sense, and they're striking them down with very long judgments. Great lack of resources. We make a parliamentary move to get rid of most of the mandatory minimums.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Merci.